Ozzy Osbourne isn't just a rock legend. He's a full-time chaos generator and an unintentional comedy icon. Keep watching as today, we're celebrating the absolute best of his accidental genius, because these moments prove nobody does being Ozzy better than Ozzy himself. Let's start with the basics. Ozzy loves his family more than life itself, but that doesn't mean they don't drive him absolutely insane. From shouting across the house to arguing with Sharon over everything from clothes to pets, Ozzy's day-to-day life looked less like a quiet retirement and more like a non-stop battle for survival. And sometimes the simplest things, like a remote control, were enough to push him to the edge. At one point, standing in front of a wall of buttons and screens, Ozzy looked like a man trying to disarm a bomb with oven mitts. While the tech guy tried explaining satellite options, channels, menus, and modes, Ozzy just stared in pure disbelief, because all he wanted was a television that turned on. But if you think the tech was complicated, imagine the dogs. Every morning, Ozzy woke up to barking, chaos, and a brand new stain somewhere in the house. He'd pace around, begging Sharon for some peace, while complaining that his mansion, his $8 million mansion, still felt like a giant radioactive kennel. And when the dogs weren't causing trouble, you could count on one person to be Sharon. Sharon had a talent for pushing Ozzy's buttons, sometimes on purpose, whether it was blasting music, overloading the schedule, or surprising him with yet another animal. She kept life interesting in the most stressful way possible. Ozzy begged her over and over, no more animals, please. And yet somehow the pet population only increased. And speaking of chaos, the kids, Jack and Kelly, didn't make things any easier. One minute they were fighting, the next they were calling the United Nations, and the next they were stressing Ozzy out with conversations no father wants to have, especially when it involves teenage relationships, arguments, or, let's just say, highly inappropriate medical topics. But every once in a while, a moment came along that was pure gold. Like the time Ozzy tried giving parental advice and ended up shouting, "Stop acting like a pair of dicks." Or when he tried dealing with Jack leaving the house with a knife, completely losing his patience as he confiscated both the weapon and the questionable t-shirt the boy was wearing. And then there were the interviews. Only Ozzy Osbourne could show up to a TV appearance, so out of it that he responded to a calm, "Good evening," with what? Followed by a confused, "Little girl?" Imagine the nation watching their rock idol drift through the interview, like someone who accidentally wandered onto the wrong set. Of course, nothing beats Ozzy's legendary honesty. When asked if he listened to Justin Bieber, Ozzy didn't even pretend. He blinked, frowned, then dropped the iconic line, "Who the fuck son is Justin Bieber?" Pure, unscripted rock star energy. But for all the madness, there were also moments too funny to ignore. There was the era where Ozzy ate nothing but burritos. Days and days of burrito obsession, asking everyone in the house whether they wanted spicy or non-spicy, even though nobody did. Or the dentist appointment where they had to use a level of laughing gas apparently designed only for Ozzy Osbourne. And even then, it barely worked. He might be the Prince of Darkness, but at the dentist, he was the king of resistance. And then we have the outfits. Sharon loved surprising Ozzy with stage clothing. Ozzy, on the other hand, hated absolutely all of it. Capes, coats, glitter, feathers, anything even remotely symbolic of bats. Ozzy refused. "I'm sick to death of bats," became a household phrase. Sharon insisted the outfits looked gorgeous, while Ozzy insisted he wanted nothing to do with any of it. But if clothing was bad, limousines were worse. Whenever Ozzy had to arrive somewhere in a stretch limo, he swore he felt like a pimp in a giant metal coffin. He hated the luxury, hated the flashiness, hated the attention. Ironic, considering he spent a lifetime performing in front of giant crowds. And while we're talking about crowds, some of Ozzy's funniest moments came right before performances. Whether he was yelling about bubbles he didn't want on stage, ranting about sacrifices to the gods, or trying to warm up without injuring himself, he always had something to complain about, loudly. And do you know about this moment when Ozzy once walked outside to find the sprinklers blasting water all over the yard, jets of water firing in every direction, like a surprise water park installation? He stood there, stunned, pacing in circles, as if the entire system had turned against him on purpose. What he didn't know was that Jack had set up the whole thing as a prank. But Ozzy's dramatic confusion made it look like he was facing a full-scale household emergency instead of a bit of harmless mischief. Next, we have the treadmill incident, which turned a simple workout into pure slapstick chaos. Ozzy stepped onto the machine with the best intentions, poked a few buttons, and somehow cranked it up to full sprint. The belt shot forward, and he was instantly hanging on for dear life, legs flying behind him in a frantic blur. The harder he tried to regain control, the more ridiculous it looked, like he'd been dropped into an out-of-control action scene, with no idea how to hit stop. Then comes the next moment, his ongoing feud with the so-called smart house. Anytime he tried to use voice commands, the results were a total gamble. He'd ask for something simple, and instead, lights would flicker randomly, doors would unlock, and the oven would suddenly roar to life. Ozzy's reactions, half outrage, half disbelief, made it seem like the house was pranking him on purpose, turning cutting-edge technology into a running gag he could never quite win. You can't forget this hilarious moment in the kitchen, where a harmless smoothie turned into a full-blown disaster. He loaded up the blender, hit the button, and completely forgot to put the lid on properly. In an instant, a purple blast of chaos exploded across the counters, the cabinets, the floor, and Ozzy himself. He just stared at the mess in shock, as if the blender had betrayed him on a personal level, transforming a quick breakfast into a scene straight out of a food fight. The next moment is even more absurd. Ozzy versus a simple sweater. While getting dressed, he somehow managed to shove his head into the sleeve instead of the neck hole. Trapped and disoriented, he wandered around the room with his arms and head in all the wrong places, wrestling with the fabric like it was a living thing. A normal morning routine instantly turned into a visual comedy bit, with Ozzy losing a one-on-one battle to his own clothes. And the most funny one might be his complete misunderstanding of the cloud. When someone told him to use it, Ozzy looked straight up at the sky, trying to figure out what on earth they were talking about. A simple bit of tech jargon instantly turned into a perfect snapshot of his ongoing battle with modern life. And through every argument, meltdown, accident, interview disaster, wardrobe fight, dog mishap, smoothie explosion, remote control rage, and dentist overdose, Ozzy stayed Ozzy. Unfiltered, unscripted, unmatched. Because that's what made him iconic. Not the screaming crowds, not the world tours, not the legendary music, though that played a part, but the simple fact that Ozzy Osbourne was always himself. Confused, hilarious, chaotic, unpredictable, brutally honest, and entirely human. If you enjoyed this wild ride through Ozzy's most unforgettable moments, hit that like button, subscribe for more legendary chaos, and ring the bell so you never miss a new video.